Welcome to the ANEW Body Insight podcast, empowering and inspiring your journey to optimal health. Hosted by Dr. Supatra Tovar, clinical psychologist, registered dietitian, fitness expert, and author of Deprogrammed Diet Culture. Rethink your relationship with food, heal your mind, and live a diet-free life. And Chantal Donnelly, physical therapist and author of Settled, How to Find Calm in a Stress-Inducing World. Here at City Club Los Angeles, we follow our guests' journey to optimal health, providing you with the keys to unlock your own wellness path. Tune in and evolve with us.
Hello, and welcome to the ANEW Body Insight podcast. We are at City Club Los Angeles. Welcome. I am Chantal Donnelly, and
I'm Dr. Supatra Tovar.
We are excited today because we have mobility and Pilates specialist Kim Spencer with us today.
Yay!
Kim's also a really good friend, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. Kimberly Spencer is a dedicated mobility and Pilates instructor with over 25 years of teaching experience. Her lifelong passion for teaching movement began during her teenage years, following her through a professional dance career and ultimately to her certification as a Pilates teacher under Long Beach Dance Conditioning. Kimberly's journey started in a physical therapy and Pilates clinic for 6 years before establishing her own studio that focuses on enhancing mobility, preventing injury, and promoting strength post-recovery. And she holds 3 accreditations, I can say that even better, accreditations, as a mobility and strength specialist in the functional range conditioning system. And in addition to her in-studio and online training services, she currently provides on-site mobility strength training to professional soccer players from the LA Football Club, that sounds like fun, and corporations like Universal Studios, that sounds even more fun. Her mobility workshops build on these tips and tools, both from years of training and working with such a wide array of movers and different problems. Thank you for being here, Kim.
Thank you for having me.
Can you share a little bit? We mentioned that you started in your teenage years really having this passion and wanting to teach movement. Can you tell us a little bit about what sparked that desire and that passion to teach?
I don't think I was personally drawn to it. It was more like I was pushed into it. I was pushed into teaching dance when I was 16 for a Cal State conservatory that they ran. And it wasn't really on my radar at the time. And then I think I was just naturally kind of good at it. I enjoyed it. It pushed me to think a little bit differently than as a person who's just dancing. And then the same thing with Pilates. I had been going there for a few years. I started when I was 13. So by the time I was 16, my Pilates instructor one day was like, get up and why don't you help her do her like footwork something? And I just stood there like, what? She's crazy. And then I led her through like footwork series and I changed some springs and I don't know, it seems like teachers have pushed me into it versus me being drawn into it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really curious what actually got you into dance in the first place. What started you off?
The story goes that we were watching TV and Swan Lake came on when I was 5 years old. And my dad switched the TV because, he doesn't want to watch Swan Lake. And apparently I threw a little tantrum. So he put it back to Swan Lake and he had to watch the whole rest of the ballet after that. And so they thought, I wonder if maybe we should enroll her in ballet class. And so they found a local studio.
Oh, wow. And what did it do for you?
Dance?
Yes.
Like throughout my years? Or, it really opened a whole different world where I could could feel like I could be myself. I didn't have to be something or someone I wasn't. Like I could just really also hyper-focus and be a perfectionist and but also kind of escape, what I was going through at the time. Yeah, because I had a hard childhood, so it really just kind of allowed me to escape from everything and just use my physical with my focus and my mental focus and my emotional. I don't know. It just gave me an outlet to drive everything through.
That's so wonderful. How did your career transition then because you were dancing professionally? We'd love to know what company you were dancing with or companies. And then how did that transition to, getting your certification from Long Beach?
Oh my gosh. So after high school, even in high school, I did little things with postmodern. I did a dance professionally, postmodern. I did a bunch of stuff when I was in high school. And then after high school, I did LA Classical, did a Taiwan tour. So I went on tour with them. And then I came back and I danced for a number of years in Santa Barbara with State Street Ballet.
Wow.
And, excuse me, and then ended up going back to Taiwan again with their tour. And then after that, we came back and I got injured on stage. I had a grade 3 major ankle sprain on stage, limped off. And I had the lead for a ballet, and there were only 3 people in that entire ballet. And it was I can't remember what it was called, but it was about Cupid, and I was Cupid. And I was desperate to have that part. So I immediately, anytime I got injured, I wanted to take Pilates because I knew I could really structure my workout to keep me as healthy as possible and to strength train in order to get myself back on stage. And I ended up not being able to do that role, which was pretty traumatizing for me at the time because it was one of those roles that was done on you. The choreography was done on you. You also participated with the choreography, and
wow.
So that was really upsetting. But I ended up being asked to again teach. So I was invited I wasn't certified at the time, but I was invited to teach Pilates to group settings right through my injury. So it's funny how I just keep getting pulled into it. So that's why I ended up getting certified, because I'm like, okay, I think it's pretty obvious that this is my next path. So I keep getting shoved over there. So why not embrace it?
Yeah, well, you were my first instructor ever.
Yes, I remember.
She always told me I had a naughty pelvis. So, I took that as a good thing. But
I have no idea what that means.
What does a naughty pelvis mean, Kim?
I'm much different now. I probably would teach you much differently if the teacher that I am now would probably teach you differently and probably not use some of the same words. Although a naughty pelvis is not necessarily a bad thing.
I mean, she was a little scary.
I do say.
I'm going to say she scared me a little bit because she's very intense. But an amazing instructor.
I care a lot. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Amazing instructor.
I think what our audience members and listeners probably don't know is that Supatra and I met Kim because we were all working at the same place. Mm-hmm. So we were all working at ATP Physical Therapy and Pilates in South Pasadena. Kim was a Pilates instructor and also worked the front desk.
Office manager. Yeah. Did it all.
You did it all. Supatra was the Pilates instructor, and I was working there. It was my first job as a physical therapy student right out of school, as physical therapy therapist right out of school. And we all met, and here we are.
Yeah.
Many years later. So you worked there for 6 years. Is there something that you saw, that you experienced, that you learned while you were in a physical therapy clinic and also the Pilates environment that you now use, or maybe it influenced you in your mobility training today?
I wouldn't say in the mobility training that I do. There's definitely some exercises and exposure to things that I definitely wouldn't have been exposed to, like vestibular stuff, listening to a surgeon come in and speak about spine, like that was all stuff that I would have probably never experienced had I not been in a PT clinic setting. But mostly management stuff, like things that I would utilize to manage a studio or my own business. So things that I would use or things maybe I would do differently. So more of that, I think, because even though I had been teaching for 2 years already before that, no, 4 years, sorry, 2 uncertified and 2 certified. I was still young. I was still early in my teaching path. So
We were young, weren't we?
we were,
We were very young.
We're still
Long
young.
time ago.
What are you talking about?
This was pre-children.
Yes.
Now our children are 19 and
Are adults.
older.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit more what you meant about learning about vestibular aspects and the things that you kind of picked up that have really informed what you're doing right now?
I don't know if it informed it. I myself recently experienced a vestibular episode. So I recalled like, oh yeah, I remembered I had learned something about that. I don't think it affected what I teach or what I choose to teach now. And that's not a bad thing. It's just it didn't really, it doesn't really lend itself to what I do now. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, maybe for the audience, if you could go into a little bit more about exactly what you do now, in that you've set up your own studio,
Yeah.
and you're, working a little bit differently than just strict Pilates. Explain what you do exactly.
Okay, where do I start? Yeah, so I opened up my own, and I was just teaching Pilates, just for, I don't even know how many years, in a boutique gym, basically. And that just wasn't a good fit. Just everything from like your environment affects the people that come in, right? So I have Pilates tends to generate people who, or bring people in who are older or looking for, not rehab based, but kind of rehab based. And I feel like people just seem to find me. They have like special needs, like ongoing back pain, ongoing hip pain, getting ready for a hip replacement. Those people find me. So just the environment wasn't conducive to having these clients in. So thankfully we found a home that I could provide a very isolated space that is private, that I can make conducive to having, people that these clients bring these clients in. I think that made a big difference. And then, to go into the whole mobility thing I'd have to start, why even you want me to go through the whole,
Yes.
So, mobility is it is very different from Pilates. It started because my daughter was 13 and she tore her ACL and meniscus and had to have major surgery. And it was actually after her. She went to a regular sort of dance therapy PT, and that was okay. But then she ended up having a second surgery, and that is when her PT after that, we found a different PT. I wasn't really happy with the PT that we had found. She was okay. She wasn't bad, but an athlete, especially a young athlete, they really need a good PT. And so we found this other PT, and he said one of the first things he gave her after her second surgery was knee cars. And I was like, knee cars? What the heck is knee cars? Well, they're controlled articular rotations. And the idea that the knee could rotate in isolation independently of any other part of the body was just mind-boggling to me. I had never learned that in all the years of teaching at a PT clinic, all the years of Pilates and PT-based Pilates, and just the whole idea of the knee could rotate in isolation and then that just started a rabbit hole of just, well, what else is this related to? And it just started my whole journey into that. And then I couldn't really focus on anything else because it made so much sense to really look at the structures that's underneath everything that I had been working with or
Wow.
trying to change, always trying to help someone be less in pain, function better, always talking about biomechanics and stuff like that. And this gave me a whole new perspective and set of tools that goes underneath all of what I was already trying to accomplish. So it really changed my perspective a lot on how I teach, on how I view the body, on words that I choose, just everything. Wow. So I don't want to say that like I wouldn't have found it had my daughter not torn her ACL. I feel like I would have eventually got there, but it did kick me over there really quickly.
As someone who has worked one-on-one with Kim in this mobility practice that she has, it is very different from physical therapy. It's very different from Pilates. It's really different from any traditional kind of movement.
It really is. Mm-hmm.
That I had experienced. And I think that pretty much anyone would experience. And I believe at some point I called it micro movements of torture,
yes.
I believe was the terminology.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So if I needed to explain it to any of you out there who are trying to figure out what it is that a CARS is or any type of, I'm trying to think of the other terms that you were using when we were working together.
I don't know. I throw a lot out there. I'm not quite sure. It's a lot of independent joint movement, very isolated, very specific, but also I don't want that people to be discouraged by those words and think, oh, I'm not flexible enough. I'm not knowledgeable enough. I'm not aware enough. And I'm teaching people on the spot, like people, cashiers, I just pull them off and they tell me something that's going on and I can give them stuff right there, then and there, without any history or anything to alleviate some of whatever they're feeling. And I feel like it is very specific and, again, very isolated and has a lot of focused intent. But it's also super accessible, and I feel like that's why I really love it. That's why I use it, and I want to have people be exposed to it. Of course, there are many, many levels to it, right? But so.
What do you mean there are many levels? Give us an idea of that.
Oh, I mean, so you're working on a joint. You're working joint to joint. So well, we're looking at, say, the spine. That was the other thing, as Pilates people, we think that we're talking about and working and training the spine all the time, but never once had I experienced segmental spine work and actually working very deep at the vertebral level, or even how to approach that with a layperson, or even a person who thinks they've been working their spine their entire life, like Pilates teachers, because I recently taught a workshop that was spine-based. So how do I explain it? There are levels in the sense that first you just get someone to move independently, feel what it's like to, say, let's go back to the knee, or to feel certain part that your spine isn't one item, but it is 24 different items. Just getting them used to feeling that they can move those things. And then, the next level would be like, well, how do we train that? What do we need more of? What are they missing? How do we train that? And them being more intentional. Thank you. I'm like, what is the word I'm looking for? Intentional about rotating their knee. So the movement might still be the same, but maybe there's a different position that would target specific parts or give them more resistance, or just them intentionally adding more tension. And then, the other level would be actually training to just sort of have a knee that very unlike Pilates, which is, keep your knees in line with your hips, in line with your ankles, would be, okay, well, what if I had my knee turned in and my foot turned out and I was holding weight and training that and bending up and down, which people would be like cringing, if you saw someone doing that on, let's say, the Reformer or the Cadillac or even just out in a gym. But then training that, being able to be that kind of, having that kind of strength in no matter what range you're using or doing.
Wow.
Yeah, just kind of making you feel a little invincible.
In all transparency, I never made it past level 1 with Kim.
Sometimes, a lot of times, level 1 is very, very hard, especially if I have chronic pain people and neuro people, and it's.
I'm a movement specialist myself, and this was so different for me. And we were working on spine articulation. And as a Pilates person, I'm Pilates certified. We do spine articulation all the time. This is on a whole other.
I think that's when you broke out the micro
movements of torture. Yes, that's when that's when
said that word
that came out.
Yeah.
Yes, I was not happy with you.
Yes, yeah.
I think if people are confused at what it might look like, your Instagram, I think you put a lot of that stuff on there.
Can you tell
us? Give your Instagram handle so people can know to go to them.
It's Mobility Focused Pilates.
And just describe some of the stuff that you put on there. I think it's fascinating.
Oh my gosh, I don't know. I put everything out there. I try to give people options, trying to kind of lay out those different levels. A lot of these Instagram marketing people say, well, you got to niche down. And I'm like, but I can help so many people. I help everyday people, but I also help Pilates teachers understand that it doesn't have to be super complicated. Like you can teach a little bit of this joint focused movement. You can integrate it, or you can experiment with yourself. Here are some options, like for the knee, for the ankle. Okay, instead of just the toe curls with the towel, like let's move them independently. And I just feel like just trying to lay options out, but also lay out options like that it doesn't have to, for Pilates people, it doesn't have to be boring. Like it can be creative if you want to, but still joint specific. Instead of just creative to be creative, which I'm all for, or creative just to strengthen, I'm all for that. But I like to really show that it can be creative, or it can be strengthening, and it can still be joint focused.
Yeah. You had mentioned your daughter's injury doing gymnastics, and I know both of your children were in competitive gymnastics when they were teenagers and younger, right?
Yeah, basically up until 12 or 13, they were very high level. Yeah.
Was there any experience or just being around the injuries that you see with gymnastics, did that guide you in any way towards what you're doing now? Is that...
I mean, I was always very interested on the choices that they would do for exercises. I was always very interested in that. But again, it was never joint specific. So not that any of the exercises that they were given or that they would do were necessarily bad, especially because my kids were in and out of PT, or we had them working with trainers. And none of it was ever joint specific, but I didn't know it at the time, right? I was just thinking more biomechanically sound, which is not something I actually use now. But I was thinking more of that direction.
And with gymnastics, if you're not articulating the joints the way that you should, you're hinging on one joint, and that's how the injury occurs. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, well, yeah, so yes, in the sense that I don't even know where to start with that one. So
Stumped ya.
yes. Okay. So yes and no, right? So I think actually gymnasts probably are like closer in the sense that they do get a lot more rotational stuff. But yeah, so typically exercises, traditional exercises, or even like gymnastics exercises, gym, Pilates even, very linear, right? Forward, back, in and out. Even if you like, we did the whole PT segment where, lunge forward, you lunge diagonal, you lunge side. But it's still very linear if you think about it. It's never rotate the knee and lunge forward that way. So, which again, people might cringe, but like, what if you can train that knee to be strong in that range? Or recently I've been posting a lot of ankles where I'm rolled out on my ankles. And I'm working with dancers at Universal and they're freaked out by that. And I tell them, I say, but how many sprains have you had? Oh, I've had multiple. Well, if you trained your ankles to be strong in that range, there's a strong possibility that you may never get a real bad sprain because you've trained your tissue to tolerate that. You've trained your tissue to roll and it doesn't freak out. It feels like, oh, well, I've done this. Like it might be achy. It might, be a little sore, but it won't blow up into a grapefruit. It won't all of a sudden pain, right? Pain eats away all your range. It says, no. You hurt me. Right. I'm going to take all your range out. And then that creates another whole other problematic pattern that a dancer has to, or a gymnast or an athlete, a mom stepping off a curb, right, has to work through. And if you never, one, recover those ranges, right, or two, ever train that faulty pattern, it's always going to be upset every time you go into that range.
You're building the body's capacity.
Yes.
Just making it as, tolerant,
flexible,
resilient, building up capacity, especially with athletes. Healthy. Let me correct that. Healthy athletes, right? But dancers are always, I say, externally rotated. So I'm trying to get them to rotate the hip in because you're spending all that time this way. Well, what about all the inner capsule stuff? Each sport athlete has their own thing, right? Their history, their physiology, fear. Fear is a huge one with chronic pain people, neuro people, and even athletes like this dancer who I've been working with, and she's like, it makes me sick to my stomach seeing you do that with your ankle. And I'm like, well, we got to get you there because you can't keep spraining it. Right? You need to build up that ankle's capacity to tolerate being rolled.
Wow. And if you start with somebody young enough, you can really increase their mobility and their strength. And their tolerance for, being kind of out of a sort of a range.
Yeah.
So that's amazing.
Yes. Now that I think back, I'm like, oh, they should have been doing other things besides those exercises. It's never that I definitely, which I feel Pilates people can tend to do, is demonize certain positions or, quote, faulty patterns or... and I don't like to, I've really steered clear of that. And that has been really freeing.
Wow. Being
able to recognize that all movement is good. Joint specific movement will give you the capacity to kind of do anything.
Awesome.
But definitely it's been freeing to not demonize like a bad position or call it bad or, I still think things are naughty in the sense that, like, they're not,
pelvis.
Like a segment that's naughty. It doesn't want to move or it's grumpy. I'll say things like that still. But
I love it. Well, we will get naughty in the next section of this podcast. But right now we're out of time. But we are so thrilled to have the amazing Kim Spencer here with us. Please join us next week for the second half of this amazing episode. And we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you so much. Thanks for tuning into the ANEW Body Insight podcast. Please remember, the content shared on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. You can find us anywhere podcasts are streaming, on YouTube at my.anew.insight and at anew-insight.com under the ANEW Body Insight podcast tab. Follow us on our socials at my.anew.insight on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads for more updates. Tune in next time and evolve with us.